I raised my nephew as my own son because my sister didn't want him. Now her daughter is jealous of her brother because they are financially struggling. When I was 18 and my sister, Karen, was 22, she became pregnant with my nephew Jake. Karen and her then boyfriend, now husband, showed no interest in Jake when he was born, so I stepped in to care for him. My grandmother, an absolute angel, was a tremendous support. My parents were not much help, only giving me about $100 a month for Jake, which, as any parent knows, is not much. So my grandmother and I were the sole caregivers for him. A year after I graduated high school, my parents, sister, and her husband kicked me out with Jake because they didn't want to deal with us anymore. My sister even said she wished she had never given birth to him. Desperate, I turned to my grandmother and we visited a family law attorney. I obtained custody of Jake, and my sister and her husband signed over their rights to me. From then on, I will refer to Jake as my son instead of my nephew. We lived with my grandmother, and while I attended community college and worked part-time, she looked after Jake. It was tough, especially when my grandmother passed away when Jake was 6. She left 90% of her estate to me in her will. This prompted my parents and sister to reach out under false pretenses to reconnect with Jake. However, the reunion didn't last long. I made it clear that they could either behave appropriately or never see us again. My dad chose to genuinely reconnect with us and we are now close. My mom and I don't talk much, but she treats Jake kindly. When Jake was 8, both my sister and I became pregnant. That's when Karen decided she wanted Jake back and started telling him that my husband and I wouldn't love him anymore once my real son arrived. For context, my husband met Jake when he was 5, and we had been together for a year before that meeting. My husband treats Jake like his own, and we got married when Jake was 7. We adopted him when he was 9. With his permission, we discovered that Karen was spreading these hurtful ideas. Jake broke down crying one day, fearing we would abandon him once his younger brother was born. He explained what Karen and her husband had been saying, and we reassured him that it would never happen. After that, I cut contact with Karen and her husband again and pursued family and individual therapy for Jake. When I finally gave birth to his younger brother, Ethan, I made it clear that our love for Jake hadn't changed. About 2 years later, when Karen reached out, I decided to go low contact with her with Jake and my husband's approval. My husband and I live comfortably, while Karen and her husband often struggle financially. My kids engage in extracurricular activities, receive the presents they desire and go on a big family trip every summer. Meanwhile, Karen and her husband can't afford much. When my niece, Emily, was around 9, Karen began making comments about how I needed to pay for various things for her. I told her it wasn't my responsibility. When Emily turned 17, Karen promised her a car but couldn't afford to buy one, so she asked me to do it. I refused, explaining that I hadn't promised her a car and it wasn't my responsibility. Karen got upset and didn't talk to me for a while after that. When Jake's 17th birthday arrived, we surprised him with a car. A couple of days later, Emily called me, screaming and crying, asking why I hated her and couldn't treat her the same as Jake. Calmly, I explained that things were different. Jake is my son, and while Emily is my niece, I can't buy her the same things as my son. I clarified that as an aunt, my role involves birthday presents, Christmas presents, and showing up when it matters, nothing more. I emphasized that Jake would always mean more to me than she ever would. Despite my calm explanation, Emily continued yelling and accused me of being unfair before hanging up. Subsequently, Karen called to berate me about doing more. I pointed out that if she hadn't promised a car or my money to Emily, none of this would have happened. It's been a couple of days, and I'm receiving calls from some family and some of Karen's friends calling me nasty names. I do feel a sense of guilt because my kids grew up with more and I suppose I could have helped more. So am I the jerk for what I said to my niece? Update 1. To get some names in order, I will be addressing my niece as Emily and my youngest son as Ethan. 2 days after Emily's call, I decided to meet up with her. We met at a park a few minutes away from my home. When we met, Emily seemed normal but a little tired. I told her I didn't mean to hurt her in any way, but she needs to understand it's not my job because I'm not her parent. She said she understood that but was jealous that Jake and Ethan got everything they wanted. I told her that, first, Jake isn't her brother, but her cousin because of how things happened. Second, they don't get everything they want. They work for it, get good grades, do chores, and stay out of trouble for the most part. I then asked her the real reason for her behavior, as she never had a problem before this. She started crying, saying it wasn't fair that Jake and Ethan get everything they want while she gets barely anything. She claimed that Jake lucked out in life by being adopted by my husband and me. She asserted that she deserves to have what my sons have and that, as family, I have to take care of her too. I told her that she is part of my family but not my child. I do love her, but she's not my responsibility. I then asked her why she felt so strongly about it. She said that even though her parents take good care of her, she feels like she's just an obligation to them. She always felt jealous that she had to be the one to leave. She felt second place and believed that since I took in Jake, I should take her in with no problem. I told her that while I understand her feelings, I'm not going to treat her as my kid. I didn't raise her, but I do love her. It's her parents' job to get her a car or help her get one. She got more upset, saying that I clearly don't care about her, and left. I texted her, saying that I do care for her but I'm not her mom, and it's not my job. After I got home, my husband and I talked and decided to call Karen. I told her that my family and I are going full no contact. Karen then asked about how I'm going to get in contact with Emily. I told her Emily is almost an adult. She can contact me if she wants. Karen then asked if I was going to get Emily a car. I said no and told her that it's her job. She's her mother and needs to act like it. Emily needs her to be a mom. I hung up the phone, blocked and deleted her number. The next day I got a call from my mom. She believes that I should give Emily some money for a car if I won't give her one. I told her I wasn't going to do that and hung up because it would just cause a fight. I then called my dad and explained everything and he thinks I'm right. Later, my dad called, asking if he could come over on Wednesday. When he showed up, he was visibly upset. Mom had given a big chunk of money out of my parents' retirement fund to Karen. This caused a huge fight between my parents, which led my dad to pack a suitcase and stay in a motel for a bit. Now, I'm no contact with my sister and mom, and I'll be going low contact with my niece for now. Update 2. About a week after the post, I decided to talk to Emily, and we agreed to meet at my home. I asked everyone not to be home because I wanted to talk to her privately. When she showed up, she didn't really want to look at me. I asked her if I could give her a hug. She told me that her dad treats her well and tries to spend time with her but is busy working 2 jobs, while Karen is home more but usually keeps to herself and doesn't like to be bothered. I brought up her referring to Jake as her brother and asked if she truly felt that way about him. She explained that she sees him as a cousin but thought that if she played the brother card I might feel inclined to help her. So I asked her if she knew how I ended up adopting Jake. She confirmed that she knew and her dad had explained what happened. Apparently, Karen sugarcoated it, whereas her dad told her the blunt truth. I then asked her if she would like to spend a fun day out with me on Saturdays. She got excited and expressed that she would really like that. That weekend, we visited a restaurant she had been wanting to try, had a good time, and then went to a bookstore because she loves to read. I bought her a couple of books she wanted. When Emily and I were supposed to have our second weekend out, I had to cancel because Ethan ended up in the hospital. At football practice, he got tackled, which knocked the wind out of him and caused a bad asthma attack. This happened on a Friday, and Ethan stayed at the hospital until Sunday. Emily and I were supposed to go out on Saturday. That morning, I called her and told her I had to cancel. Before I could explain why, she started yelling at me, saying I never cared about her, and hung up the phone. I tried calling her back, but it went straight to voicemail. Then I sent her a text saying I didn't mean to hurt her, but Ethan was in the hospital and that we could have our day next weekend. But I never heard back from her. 2 days ago, my family and I were out for a family night when my neighbors called, saying they had called the cops because someone was vandalizing one of our cars. When we got home, the cops were there, and it was Ethan's car. The car had scratches, dents, paint, and 2 broken windows. My husband and I checked our security footage, and you could clearly see Emily and someone else vandalizing the car. My husband gave a copy of the video to the police and Emily and her friend got arrested. The next morning, Karen and my mom came to my house, screaming that I was ruining Emily's life and that if I loved her I would drop the charges. My husband is adamant that we don't drop the charges, and Jake and Ethan agree with him, so that's where we stand now.